This episode of Elizaviews Whining About Movies is brought to you by the first annual Intergalactic Imagination Connoisseurs Film Festival. Elizabeth wants to know, have you made your movie? And if you have you sent it to us? If you haven't, Elizabeth is very sad and disappointed.
I am. It's true.
Is it true?
I'm sad.
Are you sad?
I want more movies.
I want more movies too. We have a few in that I'm going to put up. There's going to be some premieres.
Oh, good.
Well, anyway, and now on with the show. Well, you excited about the 17th official James Bond movie that we're going to talk about? You liked it.
I like this one a lot.
It's good. I really enjoyed it as well. Martin Campbell's first foray in the series. He also brought back Bond again with Daniel Craig in 2006's Casino Royale.
Yeah.
Very exciting.
Very exciting.
Perhaps I should run the credits so people know, in case they didn't. Goldeneye, directed by Martin Campbell, 1995. Can you believe this is 96?
96. That means 4 more, and we're at 100. And we haven't even planned our 100th.
We haven't even planned our 100th. Greetings, imagination connoisseurs. Once again, it is I, your Duke of Dope Discourse, your master of fun and wonder, your viceroy of verisimilitude, and your sommelier of cinema, Robert Meyer Burnett. And we continue our journey into the Bond franchise, but it wouldn't be a show without our star. Who are you?
I am Elizabeth Gwendolyn Bell, the ace, the arbiter of cinematic excellence, and the enchantress of entertainment.
The enchantress of entertainment. And do you know, for the very first time in our 96 episodes, we have a guest.
Yes, we do. We have a guest.
We have a guest. And allow me, for those members of the Post-Geek Singularity community, if you've ever gone to our Zoom parties, he's the man with the plan. He's made it all happen. I was able to meet him in Portland earlier this year. It was like the last time I was ever let out of the house in February. And he bought drinks. He was a gentleman. He bought drinks, even though he's a family man and has kids and mouths to feed. He still bought us drinks. And that would be the great Roberto Suarez, ladies and gentlemen. Give everybody a round. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for having me. I feel like I barged in your party, but when I heard you were doing a James Bond mini marathon, I asked Rob, hey, is there any chance I could jump in there and talk James Bond with you? And you've been gracious enough to invite me. So thank you so much for having me.
Well, I've enjoyed the videos that you've done. Like you did an Elf Quest video, and you've done some great videos for the channel. And obviously, meeting you was a real treat. And now, finding out how much you love the Bond franchise, it seemed like a natural fit. We're also bringing on Claude because he and I have gone back and forth about Skyfall for a year and a half now. So I think it's pretty great to have you. I'm sorry we didn't have you for Spy Who Loved Me, but I'm glad that you are here today. Now, the real question is, are you drinking wine?
I am drinking wine. I must say I didn't go out of my way to get this wine. I literally opened the fridge and it's what was there already open.
Bring it more into your face. There we go. Now you have to tell it. Ooh, that's very interesting. Look at that shot.
It is a Beck pink rosé.
It's a rosé.
A rosé.
Mm-hmm.
That's not very secret agent-y of you, though.
No. It's very fruity and very light. So maybe it's for a secret agent taking a break.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah.
Well, we have a fine drop. This is a Toscano Sangiovese, right?
Yes.
And it's from the...
It's from Italy.
Oh, it is from Italy.
Yes.
It is an actual Italian...
And this is an organic wine from Thrive Market.
From Thrive Market. And Isabella Scorupco is Italian.
No, she's Polish.
Oh, she's Polish. Never mind. Did you know that for a fact?
I do.
Well, let's pour it up. Let's hear it for Isabella Scorupco. I was going to make a joke, but I guess I can't now.
What was the joke?
I forgot.
But I don't know.
Liar.
Are Polish wines any good? I've never had a Polish wine, so...
I don't know. Do they make Polish wine?
Yes.
I don't know.
I feel like I've had one,
mm-hmm.
but I don't remember.
I mean, I would make a joke like, I love Polish wine. That's when they forget the grapes. I'm sorry. That's just what popped to mind in my mind. So anyway, folks, this is the... 17.
Cheers-
Oh, we
cheers
should. We
to
haven't
you.
drank. We haven't drank. Go to drink.
He
Okay.
does that all the time.
Okay. Let's all cheer.
Like,
cheers to that.
cheers.
There you go, Roberto.
Cheers.
There you go.
Cheers.
All right. That's tasty.
Very tasty.
That tastes organic. So this film is, of course, the 17th Bond film, and at the time this movie came out, there was the longest period of time between Bond movies, from License to Kill in '89 to this in '95, because there was ongoing legal battles with Kevin McClory that was going on for years. So Bond was sort of moribund for 6 years.
Yeah.
Now, Roberto, are you a Bond fan? I mean, I know you are, but what is your Bond fandom like?
My Bond fandom started back in 1978 or so, back when I first saw The Spy Who Loved Me on TV. That was the first movie that kind of introduced me to James Bond, and it was a thing that my father and I bonded over. We always bonded over Bond, my dad and I. And so we shared that fandom together. And so through the years, it's been kind of a ritual thing. I was actually at one point planning, back when the most recent movie was supposed to come out in April, I was going to be visiting my dad, who lives in Atlanta, to go see the movie together. But of course, everything got squashed. But yeah, so that's been kind of a thing that we've always had, and we've shared that fandom, and it's been just it was my first fandom, and it's been the thing that's kind of always stuck with me. So when Goldeneye came out, like you said, Rob, it had been a long pause between License to Kill and
6
Goldeneye,
years.
and Timothy Dalton was actually supposed to return, but because of the time that had lapsed, he lost his. He basically was able to get out of his contract, and so he left the franchise behind. So for me, it was huge when finally Bond came back, especially too because Pierce Brosnan had been speculated for so long to be the heir apparent to James Bond also. Even back when Roger Moore finished, he was one of the preferred choices, but couldn't do it at the time. So it was very exciting. And it just so happens that, I don't know if you know this, GoldenEye turns 25 this week. It came out in November 17th on wide released in 1995, this week.
Timing.
So 2 days from now.
Yeah, we planned this.
Yeah, we did that on
Yes,
purpose.
exactly. And for a while, I used to, my birthday is November 20th. So I used to time my birthdays either on Bond movies or Trek movies, because they always came out in November. So I remember 25 years ago going to the movie theater to watch this film very vividly. So it's a very, very much ingrained memory.
Now, you've got kids. Have you introduced Bond to your kids, and how do they feel about the franchise?
So the one who's shown the most interest is my oldest son, Alejandro, who is 18. And over the course of the past year, leading up to April, we watched all of the Bond movies in order to get ready for No Time to Die. It was kind of like me doing the same thing my dad did with me. I got to do it with him. But of course, now we have a whole year to wait for No Time to Die. So, but he had a chance to watch them all. And interestingly enough, his favorite Bond movie is the one you did last time, The Living Daylights with Timothy Dalton. That is his all-time favorite Bond film.
Wow, now we've got a couple of letters to that effect as well.
Now
so
I feel bad for saying what I said last week.
so
No
now-
worries, Elizabeth. He won't take it personally. Don't worry.
He probably doesn't watch this show, so he doesn't know what I said.
Oh, he does now. So Elizabeth, you know, you've now watched. We haven't got obviously to Daniel Craig, but you've seen the introduction of George Lazenby. Roger Moore, we didn't watch Live and Let Die, but you've seen Roger Moore. Timothy Dalton, we watched his first film, and we watched this being Pierce Brosnan's first film as Bond. Most importantly, what did you think of Pierce Brosnan as Bond?
Now, I remember when this film came out, I was super excited because it had been a long time since there was a Bond film. And I was so excited that it was Pierce Brosnan. I mean, yeah, he is a fantastic Bond.
He really is a good
He's got
Bond.
the swagger and the charm, and he's super handsome. Yeah, and he's very suave.
I love his portrayal of Bond in this movie. I think, even the way he holds a machine gun, there's a viciousness to it. And it looks like, he's very well trained. He moves very, very well. And I love his line delivery. and he can be both tough and vulnerable at the same time. What do you think about him, Roberto, as Bond?
Yeah, he was very much kind of in between the toughness of Connery and the suaveness of Roger Moore. And I mean, like I said, he had been in that TV show, Remington Steele. And for the longest time, I remember growing up, people saying, there's no way that guy is not going to be the next James Bond, because that character kind of embodied, the same qualities as Bond. And so when he finally got to play the role, something that I really liked about him, there's also kind of there's a physicality like to his fighting, where when the punches hit, they land, and you see him kind of groan and hurt in a way that you've never seen Bond kind of express that before. It's interesting that Martin Campbell did both this one and Casino Royale, because there's a similarity to the physicality of Bond in both of those films. And I think it might be a directorial choice, but it's definitely something that Brosnan brought to the role.
Yeah, I think there's a realism to this movie. What's interesting too is this film opens with a flashback sequence, and it is it opens in 1986, and it opens at a chemical weapons facility in Russia. And one of the things about this film is it's a transitional movie, because when License to Kill came out, communism was still a thing. The Berlin Wall, I believe, was still up in '89. Or did it fall in '88? Or it was.
I think it fell in 90 or 91, so
okay,
it was just on the cusp of that.
This is the first post-Cold War Bond film. And I love the Daniel Kleinman opening credits. Daniel Kleinman came in this movie. The opening credits are incredible. Good. And all the iconography of the statues of Lenin. And you see that. There's even a scene in this movie in a sort of a graveyard of the Soviet state. The statues. But it begins in the middle of the Cold War in the mid 80s, where Bond and 006, Alex Trevelyan, played by Sean Bean, in a great role.
He's great.
Yeah.
They blow up this facility. I love the pre-title sequence in this. And seemingly 006 is killed by General Orumov. Or dies, he gets shot in the head, or so we think. And then the opening credits sequence happens, and then Bond is introduced in the middle of a car chase with his therapist, driving down in the DB5, in the Aston Martin DB5, and this kind of not your typical Bond girl, but that doesn't stop Bond, and then they run across.
It's reminiscent of the car chase in Goldfinger when you think about it. When he's chasing down
Tilly Masterson.
Tilly Masterson. It has a similar vibe to that.
Yeah, and then we meet Xenia Onatopp, played by the delightful Famke Johnson. So what did you think? Right. Like immediately, this film has a different look. It's got a crisper, shinier mid-90s Hollywood look to it. I think Martin Campbell's directing is great. Like, what struck you when you first see Bond in the modern day? Like, obviously he's great in the opening. So what do you think of the stunt? The opening stunt, the dive off the
dam was frightening.
I mean, you were commenting on it. You're like, oh.
And it stuck in my memory. Like, I remember when I first saw this film, I remember that scene very well. And it's frightening. I mean, I'm afraid of heights, so anything that has to. And anytime in a movie there's like heights, I get, my palms start sweating and I just get freaked out.
Well, there's the great moment when the camera pans up and over the dam, up above Bond's head, and I remember in the theater going, whoa.
Yeah, it's scary.
Yeah, and the moment when the cable snaps on his body, it feels like it hurts. Like that, there's that moment when it kind of snaps back, and just like, oh.
Yeah, and then you're also afraid he's going to hit the wall. But yeah.
Well, it in fact did hurt, because we watched the documentary that's on the Blu-ray, and he said that Stuntman said when it snaps back,
it took his breath
away, and he really felt
it. And he yelped out, and you can hear that in the film.
But he also at the same time had to pull out that the gun that he's firing to pull him down. So
yeah, with the grappling hook thing. Yeah.
Now, obviously, the opening title sequence, Daniel Kleinman's title sequence, is beautiful. He replaces Maurice Binder, who had done the title sequences after Robert Brownjohn, and Binder had been doing them since the '60s. And now we had Daniel Kleinman with, of course, computer technology. He was able to do he did all of the title sequences up through Spectre, except he didn't do Quantum of Solace.
He didn't do Quantum, that's right.
But the rest of them are his, and they're fantastic. I'm sure he did No Time to Die. But the opening title sequence is great. And, of course, we have the Tina Turner song, Goldeneye. What do you guys think of that song?
I think it's great. I really like it. It's very Bondy.
Yeah, a lot of these things about this movie was to kind of harken back to that classic Bond sound, right? So with a movie with the word gold in the title, obviously they're trying to emulate that kind of Goldfinger type of big bombastic Bond sound. So bringing in Tina Turner to do that was great. And the title sequence along with this movie, it's the most meta Bond has ever been for me. Like, the movie comments on the fact that Bond is kind of an archaic, a thing of the past, a thing of the Cold War. So it's a really interesting movie and kind of prepping the audience for what the new phase of Bond is going to be. Because the movie, through this imagery that we see in this title sequence, and then later on through dialogue with M and other scenes, it is kind of commenting on Bond has to change because the world has changed, which is really interesting to bring that into the story.
Yeah, one of the things that's sort of controversial about this movie is Eric Serra's music score. Now, Eric Serra had scored Luc Besson's films like La Femme Nikita, and later scored Leon the Professional. Now, I am a fan. Some of the music that he did was replaced, like in the tank chase sequence in St. Petersburg. But I'm a fan of his score. I like the electronic sounds, and you really get a sense of it as soon as Bond runs at the beginning of the pre-title sequence when he's running onto the dam. You really start hearing there's a lot of strange electronic sounds, and I really love the score. A lot of people hate it. It's not very Bondian, but I had hated Michael Kamen's score for License to Kill, so I thought it was an interesting choice. I know it was not popular with a lot of people, but I liked it a lot. What did you guys think of the score?
Well, when they're in the car chase scene, that's when the electronic music comes on, and it's kind of jarring. It's like, what is this?
It's very Sheila E. It's got a very Sheila E. sound to it.
Yeah, it's like, whoa, what is this? And then you kind of get acclimated to it, but it was a little like, what? This is weird.
Yeah, see, I did not like that car chase music at all.
Yeah.
It's
I thought you'd like it because you love that electronic music.
But that's the one moment in the movie when it's kind of jarring. Outside of that, I think it's a perfectly fine score. I do recognize, though, that even with the gun barrel sequence in Goldeneye, the Bond theme gets kind of downplayed in this movie. You don't really hear it much in this film, which is, I'm wondering if there was a lot of criticism of that when it happened, because in Tomorrow Never Dies, they overplay the Bond theme over and over. So I don't know if there was a reaction to that, because it's kind of downplayed in this movie.
And that's when they brought in a new composer, obviously, and who stayed with the franchise for a while, who was a big fan. But but then we meet Xenia Onatopp, and we get a lot of Bondian. He plays Baccarat, and he goes to the hotel, and you're in a beautiful location, and you're definitely in the posh, wealthy Bondian atmosphere, and it's pretty great. So, and then we start kicking off the plot.
The valet knows his name, welcome, Mr. Bond. I mean, it's all those classic tropes of the Bond, of the classic Bond.
Shaken, not stirred. And they even bring that into the rest of the film and kind of make fun of it.
Yes.
Which is kind of funny. I love that. I love moments like that. And like you were saying, when M tells him that he's a relic.
He's a sexist, misogynist dinosaur, a relic of the Cold War.
I loved all of that. I thought that was great. It was a great way to usher in the new era of Bond.
Right.
Now, what did you guys think of? I think Judi Dench is a revelation in this movie. I mean, she's always a revelation, but in terms of how the franchise has gone, I think it was a bold move to make M a woman.
Yeah.
And cast someone like Judi Dench, who immediately has gravitas.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, it brings an importance to the character that it never really had up until this movie. I mean, the reality is Bernard Lee and Robert Brown, they're not memorable. They're just known as the guy who sends Bond on missions. But this is the time with Judi Dench, M really becomes a critical character in the circle of James Bond.
And she played
Yeah.
the role for 22 years,
Yeah.
all the way up through Skyfall,
Yeah.
until Bond failed
right.
to protect her life, which we'll talk about on Tuesday.
I'm going to let you argue that point all you want.
So tell us about the plot, you two. I mean, it turns out that, well, there's a helicopter. There's this new helicopter. What's going on?
Are we starting from the beginning?
Well, yeah, I mean, okay, Bond gets this casino, and it sort of kicks off the plot. What's happening?
Yeah. I don't remember.
So I'll jump in. The helicopter
Yes,
has the ability to withstand EMPs, electromagnetic pulse, and they're showcasing this helicopter at this event. And so Bond is basically following his own hunch and leads, trying to figure out why is this person, Xenia Onatopp, who's associated with a crime syndicate,
The Janos Crime Syndicate.
the Janus crime syndicate. Why is she there? And so he's kind of putting two and two together, and it ends up being that Onatopp is planning to steal the helicopter.
And so then something happens. We go to a facility in the Soviet Union, the former Soviet Union. Where
The former Soviet Union.
Yeah, they're the former Soviet Union.
Yeah.
The Severnaya facility, and we find out what's going on up there, kids. What's going on at Severnaya?
Well, I mean, they introduce you to a few more characters.
They do.
Boris, who is one of the
Played by Alan Cumming.
yeah.
In a
Alan
pretty
Cumming.
showy role. It's like, what movie is he in? I mean, I love
I know.
Alan Cumming, but he's a little over the top in this.
He's over
Very
the top.
over the top.
Yeah.
He's invincible.
Invincible. And then you meet the Bond girl.
We do.
I don't know her name in the movie. It's some long Russian name.
She's Natalia Simonova.
There you go.
Simonova or something.
Yeah.
She actually corrects Bond when he mispronounces her name in
Which
the movie.
is great. I love that too. That was awesome.
So
So you're introduced to these characters, and they work in this facility. I think it's a nuclear facility or something like that, right?
well, it's a satellite. I mean,
A satellite.
satellite monitoring or central control for like Russian satellites.
Yeah, but it also controls this new weapon or
the Goldeneye,
the Goldeneye.
which can fire an electromagnetic pulse that will destroy anything with an electronic circuit.
Right.
Now, my biggest criticism of this film is we spend like 20 minutes at Severnaya. We spend a long amount of screen time
Yeah.
with this facility, and they're setting up, I mean, away from Bond,
Yeah.
and that was unusual for a Bond film.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, and it's it's all the setup needed to kind of connect what was happening with the helicopter with the future, the plans that were kind of being set up with the stealing of the helicopter. So you're kind of piecing together the other half of the story that you don't get to see of why was the helicopter stolen. So this is kind of catching you up to that point.
Yeah.
yes, and the helicopter was stolen because they need to get the Goldeneye, the materials they need away from Severnaya, and Severnaya itself is going to be destroyed to cover their tracks.
Right.
Right.
So
And they're going to use the Goldeneye to destroy it, which will emit an EMP. So the helicopter has to be able to sustain the EMP pulse.
Right,
Yeah.
and that's how they get out. And we should mention that the Derek Meddings, this movie is dedicated to Derek Meddings, who was the great miniature effects supervisor who worked on so many of the Bond movies. This was the
Right.
last film that he worked on and did the miniatures for. And there's both some great miniatures, and then there's some miniatures that look a little Jerry Anderson, Thunderbirds, Captain Scarlet, like when the plane crashes at Severnaya, the MiG. There's some.
Yeah.
But I really think the miniature work at the end of the movie is fantastic. For the recreation of the Puerto Rican. You're the Puerto Geekian.
That's
So
right.
have
I'll have to tell you. I have all sorts of trivia on the observatory for when we
Okay,
get
well,
to
when
that.
we'll get to. I was going to ask you because first, just before, have you ever been there?
I've been multiple times. That was a classic field trip place to go when we were in middle school. So at least once a year, we got to do a field trip to the Arecibo Observatory. So
okay,
yeah, been there several times.
So I figured when we moved you from Spy Who Loved Me to this, that you would have stories about the Arecibo Observatory. So I'm glad you're
perfect.
I'm glad you're on this show.
All of the scenes that are supposed to take place in Cuba were filmed in Puerto Rico, not just the scenes at the observatory. So anything on the beach, anything there, those are all I believe they filmed in the town of Dorado for the beach scenes. And so at the time, my sister would send me updates, news clippings of Pierce Brosnan sightings in Puerto Rico during the filming of Goldeneye.
But you had moved, you'd come to America before then.
I was already living in the States at the time, yeah.
Did you ever think about maybe going back and seeing if you could see any of the filming happen with your dad?
I should have. I don't know why I didn't think about it, but I definitely should have.
So then, the helicopter gets stolen, the Goldeneye gets taken away, the Llanos crime syndicate has achieved its goals, but we still don't know who's behind the Llanos crime syndicate. Mm-hmm. We don't know. And then General Ormov looks like he's behind it all, and we begin a long, protracted Bondian investigation into what's really happening.
Right.
And we have, it's interesting, you go to Russia and we meet a couple of other new characters in the franchise that I really like Robbie Coltrane playing Valentin Zukovsky, who mm-hmm. I really like. And then, interestingly enough, that Felix Leiter's not in this movie, but we get Jack Wade, who is being played by Joe Don Baker, who we last saw in The Living Daylights, playing the villain.
I know.
Yeah,
I know. It's a little weird in that sense, but I think what they were trying to do is maybe establish a Felix Leiter-like character that would be played in the next movies with the same actor, as opposed to making the switcheroo every movie that Felix Leiter shows up. So I thought they were thinking about starting with a clean slate. I think he only ended up showing up in 2 of the Brosnan movies, though, if I remember correctly.
I mean, I think Joe Don Baker is a great actor, but he seems really miscast in the Bond films.
He throws me out of the film both films. It was like, this character doesn't belong in this film. I agree. He's a great actor, but he doesn't belong in a Bond film. It just was distracting.
Well, it takes you back to like J.W. Pepper in Live and Let Die.
I know.
Man with Golden Gun. I mean, a good old boy from Louisiana in the swamps.
You're a secret agent.
and the way hello, Jimbo. CIA's got your back. But in a way, I can kind of see, like, with Zukovsky. He's like the opposite of Zukovsky, even though Zukovsky's a KGB officer, right. And he's Robbie Coltrane's having the best time, and he's really good.
And he shows up in one more. So I think they kind of split the difference between those 2 characters to have them recur. So Joe Don Baker gets 2 movies. Robbie Coltrane gets 2 movies in the Brosnan era. So it was a way to kind of have a little bit of continuity with those contacts that Bond has throughout.
I do like the chemistry that Bond has with those characters. Like when you first meet Zukovsky in like that club where Minnie Driver is singing, which is what a random.
I was like, is that Minnie Driver?
Minnie Driver is Zukovsky's mistress. Like, you didn't cast some
she's
hot.
Singing off key in a Russian accent. It's like, what is this?
It's so weird.
How you like them apples? Well, I like them. It's very.
Had she been in Grosse Pointe Blank already at that point, or did Grosse Pointe Blank come after that?
I think
it was later. Okay,
and so was Good Will Hunting, and maybe this was a big break.
Maybe.
But, I mean, she looks good, but even you said, "Is that Minnie Driver?"
I know. It's so out of left field. See, watching it now, knowing her, you're like, wow, what a weird role for her to be in.
But I do think that Bond, like Brosnan and Coltrane, have a great chemistry.
Yes.
They really have
very much so. Yeah. And the Jack Wade character, my understanding is that there was more to him, but a lot of his footage ended up being cut. There's a lot that gets dropped in this movie. Apparently, there's some behind-the-scenes stuff. And it's a little awkward because there's that moment where he tells Bond, do you like gardening? and it's kind of a random quote. But apparently that is kind of a trait of the character, and there's some scenes that were cut out in which he's talking about all these things he likes to do with guarding and stuff. So it was kind of supposed to be like a quirk of the character, but because they edited so much out of the character, we never really kind of get a sense of what that meant when he asks Bond about gardening.
Well, what's really great, I think, about the film is how it is edited. This is a very swift-moving Bond film. The pace of it's terrific. I mean, it moves around rapid fire, and I'm a huge fan. I really like this movie a lot, especially because I really did not like License to Kill at all. It's one of my least favorite Bond films. It seems like, again, it's copying a Miami Vice episode, and a lot of it was just filmed in Mexico. Not that that's a bad thing, but it just doesn't have that lush feeling. And the post-Soviet era, you're not in Leningrad, you're in St. Petersburg, and it's this film just brought back the grandeur to the Bond franchise, I think.
Very much so. Very much so. It was kind of a needed reboot for the franchise in a way. They had a big long gap. They knew that License to Kill, even though I think commercially it had done okay, it did not capture that sense of grandeur that Bond had always had. So this was a way for them to really kind of reestablish the character, and the movie really delivered in that front.
Yeah, I think so too. And and then it is actually, I think, when I remember first seeing the film, I mean, I'd seen the trailers a million times. The trailers for this movie are great. The teaser trailer and the release trailer are great. So that Sean Bean's coming back, but when he's reintroduced in the graveyard, and the rubble of the Soviet, the Soviet state, and then he comes out of the shadows in silhouette.
Yeah,
it's pretty great, isn't it?
It is
when he gets reintroduced.
Yeah.
And this movie kind of preys into some fears at the time. I remember at the end of the Cold War, there were fears of what's going to happen with all the weapons. Like now that the Soviet Union has fallen, could these weapons fall into the black market and potentially new threats come out because of that? So it kind of plays with that in the midst of the rubble and the destruction of the former Soviet Union. Here's a bad guy who is taking advantage of that situation strictly for commercial, for financial gain, right? He's a rogue agent now at taking advantage of the aftermath of the Cold War. So it really kind of played into some of the fears of the time.
Yeah, and absolutely. And also the fact that you have Oromov, who's a bent Russian general. He's gone over to work for the crime syndicate because why not? Why not get rich?
Why not?
And as we discover, the overall plot of this movie is literally just to steal money. There's even an echo later on in the film that they definitely inspired by Die Hard when Holly McClane says, "You mean you're just a common thief?" She says that to Hans Gruber in Die Hard, and he's like, "I am an exceptional thief, woman. Whatever. I'm not just a common thief. I'm getting $650 million worth of bearer bonds, and I'm going to kill everybody here and get away with it." And you kind of have that same beat is played, and I'm sure they took that from Die Hard.
They also take a little bit from the original Moonraker novel. The novel Moonraker and the movie Moonraker are very different. And in the novel Moonraker, Drax, who is supposed to be this British industrialist, secretly is a Nazi, and he's wanting to exert revenge on England. So there is that sense too with Trevelyan's past of being a Cossack and his family being betrayed by England. Now he's wanting to take revenge on England as well. So that's an element that kind of harkens back to that piece and to that story element of Moonraker.
Interesting.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think that's what's really interesting is when you find out what Trevelyan's motivations were, that his parents were Cossacks and they were repatriated to the Soviet Union after collaborating during World War II.
Right.
And they were bad. And it's like, I'll tell you something. I never knew in Star Trek when like Chekhov said Cossacks, I'm like, what's wrong with that?
Right.
Now when I saw Goldeneye 20 years later, now I know, and
this movie a lot of it is about kind of the unintended consequences of those things that happened in the past, right? So there's the betrayal of the Cossacks. There's all the nuclear weaponry now lying out and about after the fall of the Soviet Union. There's a great line when Alec tells Bond, do you ever drown out the screams of all the people you've killed with all your drinks? There's a lot of kind of hearkening back to the sins of the past and the consequences being kind of played out now.
And I will say, you brought up, like, I love the script in this movie is pretty damn good. The dialogue is good, like the scene with M, that scene, and you're looking for solace in the arms of all those women, and
right,
and that double. I really like that double. I mean, I think that another weakness of this film is they really could have played up the conflict between 006 and 007. I don't think there's enough of them going head to head and outsmarting each other.
Yeah, that would have been cool.
He becomes, when he's introduced, and then Ourumov, he's being questioned by Checky Cario, who's another favorite actor of mine, comes in. He plays Dmitri, I forget the real Russian.
Yeah, the Minister of Defense or something.
Yeah, that Ourumov later
kills
during his debriefing or whatever. And I just love that he's in this movie. And, then we have all the shenanigans in St. Petersburg, including a tank chase, and the armored train that is dispensed with far too soon.
Yeah.
I love that train. That train is so cool. It should have been it should have had a bigger role in the movie because
I agree. It's like a mobile base, like this thing that's barreling, and it only gets it gets like 10 minutes of screen time, and it's cool, and
it is cool.
And and then eventually Bond meets up with Natalia, and they wind up together through the machinations of the plot and finding out what's going on.
And she uncovers that it was Boris who kind of did all the betrayal. Like at one point they're trying to meet up with him in St. Petersburg, and then that's when she gets captured by Alec. We have that moment after, it's the classic Bond moment, right, where Alec has him right there. And instead of just killing Bond, they shoot him with a sleeping dart and then put him in the helicopter with enough time for them to escape. It's always. But I think rewatching the movie, I appreciated that what they were trying to do is frame Bond and her. Like Alec knew Bond was going to escape from the helicopter. It was all about framing them to get them. The Russians off the trail of Janice. So it did have a motivation there behind that, but it's just a classic, you have him right there. Why don't you just do away with him and kill him right away? But no, we have to stretch it out. We always have to figure out a way to let Bond get away.
Yes, he has to survive, right?
and I think that's okay.
Yeah,
it's okay.
And I'm glad that they gave a reason for it. That's good.
They did, and there is a reason for it. Which it's easy if you're not paying attention, you can miss it. But there is a reason there. So
now you've actually been to the Soviet Union. Have you been to the Soviet Union?
I have
Russia,
not.
But you've been to Russia.
I have.
Now, where in Russia did you go?
I was in Moscow, and I also went to St. Petersburg. We took an overnight train to St. Petersburg from Moscow.
Did you go to L'Ermitage?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, we did.
What was Russia like? I know you're not a real fan.
Well, don't say that.
Well, your impressions.
Well, growing up, I loved ballet, and I was in ballet until I had private lessons. I wanted to be a ballerina. So, there's huge associations with ballet and Russia, and so you have this romantic idea of Russia, and so I had built it up in my mind that it was this amazing romantic place, and when I went there, it was rows and rows and rows and rows and rows of these giant apartment buildings. And that's what it was. It was just row after row after row after row of apartment buildings that everybody lives in.
Oppressive communist architecture.
Yeah. And it was
brutalist architecture and a lot of brown, right? A lot of brown and gray and
yes, very
drab.
gray. Mm-hmm. And then you can't even read the signs because they're all in Cyrillic. And so you feel completely lost and because you can't even try to understand the signs.
It's a different alphabet.
So you always need someone who is Russian with you. And then nobody smiles, nobody's friendly. They're all like grumpy. It was not what I thought it would
No,
be.
no. Now, Elizabeth, was this pre communism? Like, was it still during communist
Oh no,
Russia,
no,
or
no.
was this after?
This was maybe 10 years ago.
Okay, okay.
Yeah, about
Yeah.
10 years ago.
10 years ago.
Yeah. But St. Petersburg is beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
It's so different than Moscow. So different. But still, everyone's grumpy there. We were rushed out of the Hermitage by the guards, who are these babushkas. If I don't know if I can say that, but yeah, it was like these babushkas were like rushing us out 10 minutes before the museum actually closed. And I was so mad because I was trying to get to a certain room where the paintings I wanted to see were, and they were rushing us out. And I was like, but we have 10 more minutes. But you couldn't say that to them because they were like, get out, get out. And they were like swearing at us in Russian.
Not the most upset. Doesn't sound like the most friendly tourist destination, at least.
Well,
at the
it's
time.
like I'm never ever probably never going to go back, and for me to miss the paintings that I wanted to see was very disappointing.
Yeah.
So that probably added to my negative attitude. But I did get to see a ballet there, which was amazing.
Well, okay then.
Okay then.
You know, well, so you know, we Trevelyan is going to. They're going to, I guess, kill Bond. There's all the helicopter comes back into play, and Bond is put into the helicopter, and Natalia's in there, and they both escape together as they eject, and then you have
that's when they meet for the first time. That's their first meeting and that's when Bond puts together 1, 2, and 2 together that he had seen somebody escape from the facility in Russia, and he realizes, okay, this is the person we saw escaping in the satellite footage.
I love the scene in the movie where Bond gets knocked out, like you said, and then he wakes up, and you just hear scream behind him. And it's a great
Yes.
sort of moment where you're as a viewer sort of as disconcerted as Bond is, like where am I, and who is yelling at me, and why are they yelling at me? And it's great, and that's when you meet them, and of course, again, it's got the Die Hard 2 scene where they eject from the helicopter, just like John McClane ejecting from the plane in Die Hard 2, where he comes right up into the camera lens and then goes right back down. So this definitely, I mean, the Bond producers, I've said it a lot on this show, but the Bond films used to be trendsetters in the 60s. They were showing us action scenes no one had ever seen before, and in the 70s especially, Bond was chasing trends with Live and Let Die. They were chasing blaxploitation, and Mouth, Golden Gun, they were chasing martial arts films, and I mean, then Spy Who Loved Me and Moonraker are going after the bigger budgeted. I mean, Moonraker they were supposed to make For Your Eyes Only right after Spy Who Loved Me, but they made Moonraker instead, and that was Star Wars was successful. Let's take Bond into space, and then in the 80s, Bond was kind of going back to its spy roots, even though it was it was all right. But this film definitely was making a bid to bringing Bond back into the 90s in a post-Die Hard world. You know, when we had Die Hard, and Die Hard with a Vengeance came out the same year. It came out in 95. So, it was interesting that I still think that Goldeneye, as far as 90s action films go, it's peak 90s action. I mean, it's right up there. So it really did bring Bond back into the same realm as these other not pretenders to the throne, but successors to the Bond throne, because certainly the Die Hard films were, and the Tom Cruise Mission Impossible franchise, and I think Mission Impossible came out in 94, 95, the first one, I'm not sure.
The first one came out in 92, because it came out right around the time we got married. My wife and I went to see it during our honeymoon, so it was 92.
Yeah,
I'm sorry, 96,
train
96,
sequence.
sorry, 96.
Oh, it came out in 96, so it came out
96,
after. Okay,
a year later, yeah.
A year later. But still, I mean, I think this is peak 90s action, and
yeah.
So all the stuff that happens with Bond getting recaptured and all this, there's the great tank chase, and then they wind up in our armored train.
Yeah, that tank chase has to be the highlight of the movie for me. I mean, as far as how, first of all, I don't even know how you filmed that. I mean, bursting through all those buildings and stuff. I mean, I know that this was the first movie in the Bond franchise to use CG effects. I don't know to what extent they were used for those sequences, but it's pretty crazy how Bond, plows through all these buildings in St. Petersburg using this tank. And I love the speed of it, because I always associated tanks with being slow-moving vehicles, and I love that it's a fast-moving tank, and all those scenes where he's just kind of peeking through the top of the thing, and he's
adjusting his tie, so he makes sure he's looking great while he's driving a tank.
Which they echo in World Is Not Enough in the boat chase on the Thames, when he comes out and he's underwater adjusting his tie, and then even Daniel Craig adjusts his cufflinks in Skyfall in the opening. It's great, but I feel the same way you did. I've never seen a tank move that fast, and the way it just drives over cars, like it literally crushes. I mean, they were really.
It goes through walls.
I mean, these were physical effects, and you're like, oh my god.
I know. So I have no idea how they got away with that, and how many sets they must have. I know that they built a huge new, I think it was Levingston Studios that was built for this movie because Pinewood wasn't available, and it was in a big airplane hangar. So I don't know what kind of facilities they used to have the tank plow through all those walls of concrete. And I mean, even that statue ends up on the roof of a car that ends up falling on the cars behind. I mean, it's all very choreographed, but it's great. It's perfect.
It's really great.
Fun chase. And it's a little less comical. I mean, it has its comic elements, but when you think back to like Spy Who Loved Me or Moonraker, where the chases became super comical with all the little side gags with drunk people on the street looking at their bottle after seeing a car come out of the water and whatnot. It wasn't as goofy as that, but it still retained some of those goofy elements.
Yeah. I mean, it's really incredible. And the tank sequence is it's all practical. I don't think there's any CG in that at all.
I know. It's pretty amazing.
Yeah,
it's the one time in the movie where the Bond theme finally kind of comes back into use, and it's really put to good use in that moment.
Yeah, no, I don't know if David Arnold, the composer who comes onto the Bond franchise with Tomorrow Never Dies, who's a great successor to John Barry, because we lost John Barry in Living Daylights. Michael Kamen scored License to Kill, and now Eric Serra is doing this, which again they were trying to make an appeal to update. I don't think using Eric Serra was a bad idea, because his movies worked. I mean, his scores worked really well in like La Femme Nikita. It's just, I think it just doesn't work for Bond. But in the tank sequence, I think maybe David Arnold scored that sequence, because it's not Eric Serra's music. And
and it just uses the I mean, it just kind of uses that over and over, and really, really effective in that scene, especially with this tank plowing through things, to just kind of heighten that with that. It works really,
they used
really
it again when they were in the archives, but you can't hear it because of all the shooting.
Right.
Which I found where I was like, oh, there's the theme. Oh, wait, I can't hear it.
Well, and they also play the theme. The Bond theme gets played a lot using drums in this movie. So there's a lot of doom, 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 doom.
Yeah.
So it's a lot lower than the kind of the. It's not using the guitar. It's using more percussive instruments.
Yeah, that's Eric. That was Eric Serra, and I really like that. But then it would be like you'd hear the drums going doom, doo, 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 but then you hear that wah, wah, wah. It was kind of incongruous,
It's interesting. Yeah.
But and then after the whole St. Petersburg scene, the action shifts. They have to go to Cuba. I mean,
so they find out that Boris was in. I love. There's one aspect of '90s computer technology that I love in this movie. All the goofy graphics, where you send a message and it's got a caricature of the character making fun of you, and I'm about to send a spike, and then on the screen it says Spike.
Which all of that is just early internet nonsense.
Totally early internet nonsense, but it's so beautiful. And the map, you see this like Commodore 64 map come on with like little dots connecting through the map. Like, where is he? Oh, he's in Cuba. I'm gonna spike him.
Yeah,
it's all so silly.
I mean, I guess it was they needed a quick fix to get through to the audience that yes, this computer technology works this way.
Right,
I have to say,
at the time I didn't even notice it, but you just now you notice it because you're like, it doesn't work like that, right? We know too much nowadays.
Yeah. What were you gonna say?
There is one character that was not played up in this movie, like in all the other movies. The car, the beautiful BMW, was barely used, and it was full of gadgets. And I don't think they used any of the gadgets.
They didn't use, and it's fun. They're on. They go to. I guess they're not on Cuba yet. They're on a different island. Are they on Puerto Rico?
No.
Because they give them the plane to fly to Cuba. They have to fly underneath the radar. 500, and I love that Natalia knows that 600 feet. She's like, no, it's 500 feet because she knows. And what I like about her is she's pretty capable. I mean, as a Bond woman, I think she's beautiful, but I also think she's capable. She's smart. She's a computer programmer. She knows her job.
Yeah.
Which is cool.
She's a second level computer programmer.
Whatever that means.
Yeah, you can't get through her codes. So.
That's right. Yeah, but it's a really good point, Elizabeth. Not only is the car, we do get the classic Q scene where Q gives him the belt, which he later uses. He gives him the pen, which later comes into play.
And the laser in the watch.
And the laser in the watch. All of those things come into play. He gives them the car. He points out all the weaponry in the car. But it's like, this is like Chekhov's anti-gun. It's like they introduce something that never pays off later in the movie.
Yeah,
I remember,
and I was so excited because I love BMWs, and it was my favorite color, and I was like, this car is amazing. And then we don't get to see it do its thing.
Doesn't do anything, yeah. And not only that, at the time, there was an ad campaign featuring that BMW with Q in the commercial. So I remember being like, oh my God, this is going to be awesome. And then the car does nothing in the movie.
I wonder if that was one of the things that was cut out of the film. Like they had because they're just driving and then they meet Wade. Actually, it's a really great, there's a little behind the scenes snippet of how they filmed Wade's plane landing right in front of the BMW. That's a pretty amazing. I mean, that plane is literally, they did that for real. And it's, that was a tough, but that's all they do. They're driving along this dirt road. He shows up in a Cessna and they switch. I'll take the Beamer and you can have the Cessna. That doesn't seem like a fair trade to me.
Yeah, right?
I
couldn't believe it. I was like, they're giving up the car already?
Yeah. The only thing we get is him telling Wade, don't press any buttons, and then he just takes off with it, and it
would have been cool to see him press some buttons and some crazy stuff happen.
Yeah, well, Bond says don't press any buttons, and it could blow up, right? So
I'm wondering too if there was criticism of that when this movie came out, because then again, in Tomorrow Never Dies, they showcase a BMW once again, and it goes all out with gadgetry, and it's got a remote control. So they kind of overcompensated with Tomorrow Never Dies for not having the car do anything in Goldeneye.
Probably BMW was pissed. They were like, what the hell?
Exactly.
We gave you the car and you didn't do anything with it?
Exactly. So in Tomorrow Never Dies, he's got a remote control. He's driving it from the back seat.
But it's still an action sequence
blowing out.
But it's set in a parking garage.
And it's in a parking garage.
It's a car chase in a parking garage.
I know. It's the weirdest scene.
The drift.
And it ends up
like the drift. It
ends up crashing into an Avis. I mean, the product placement is all over the place in that car chase scene in Tomorrow Never Dies. And it also has gadgets that are unique for the specific situation. Like a cable gets put across the way, so he has a little thing that cuts cables. Like it's like custom made for the exact same trap that they were going to lay out for him.
Perfect.
That's crazy. So the final third of the movie is set in Cuba, but it's Puerto Rico. So
correct.
And they're looking for this dish. It's kind of cool. Again, very Thunderbirds, very Derek Mettings. They can't really find a dish, and then, it's underwater. There's a whole lake there that they drain. Where that lake water goes, I don't know, and where it comes back from. Tell us a little bit about the Arecibo. By the way, also used in the movie Contact. Or maybe,
correct. Also in Contact, plays in, and in the movie Contact, it is the Arecibo radio telescope. So it's actually
it plays itself.
It plays itself. Here, it's a stand-in for this Cuban base. But so the Arecibo radio telescope has been there, since the 60s, I think. and it is used to measure interstellar activity through radio waves. So I believe they've used it for things like pulsar research, and a lot of the exoplanets that have been discovered, it has been through research done there. It probably came into most prominence in the 80s and 90s because Eddie, for extraterrestrial intelligence, used the Arecibo radio telescope to search for patterns in sound waves and things coming out from the universe to try to see if we could pick up any intelligent life forms out there. And there's a famous graphic that was shown by Carl Sagan in Cosmos that was communicated out of the Arecibo telescope into the universe, similar to like the gold disc in the Voyager probe.
Right.
It's like a message that was sent to help any civilizations out there identify that there are smart individuals, civilized individuals in this little speck in the middle of the universe. So the place, sadly, it's in disrepair nowadays. It's after the hurricane in 2017. It's sustained some serious damage, and there's not a lot of funding to fix it. And actually, it was just in the news last week that they're thinking it might actually it's not structurally sound, which is really, really sad to hear, because there's a lot of researchers all over the world that depend on data from that telescope. So it's but it was great to see it in the movie. I remember when I went to see Goldeneye, that's when it kind of clicked, that because my sister had been telling me, oh, they're filming a James Bond movie here in Puerto Rico. And so when I went to see the movie, I had kind of forgotten that fact. And all of a sudden, this thing starts to come out of the water. And I'm like, that thing is not underwater. What are they doing? And then you realize, oh, okay, they're using it so they use the satellite as the bad guy's base, even though there's no lake there's no water anywhere. It's just a static dish. But with the special effects, they were able to create that really cool scene with the dish coming out of the water.
And there we get the final battle between Bond and Natalia. They both participate, and as the Goldeneye is going into place to blow up London, to blast London with the giant EMP, and you get
and at the same time steal the money, because it was a double whammy, right? Mess up London, but also steal all this money from the Bank of England.
No one will be able to tell that you did it because it
would be destroyed.
So what do you guys think of the climax of the movie?
Oh, it's great. Yeah, I love it that she, Natalia, messes with the computer and puts in these codes or passwords that Boris is unable to crack.
Yeah, so it's really her that
right?
She thwarts the Goldeneye, which is pretty neat. It's not something, because Bond has to have his mano-a-mano showdown with Trevelyan, so it's kind of neat that they allowed the Bond girl to step up and actually literally save the world, the world's financial situation.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then we have, I think, the fight between Bond and Trevelyan in the tower there. Again, very physical, very visceral fight. Like, you can feel the punches land. You can feel them getting hurt, and it's the one moment in the movie where you can see, okay, these are two guys who were trained by the same agency, using all the tricks of the trade to fight one another. Like, they're just basically one trying to one up the other, but they're equally matched. And so it's a very good scene, that whole fight sequence there.
I agree. And even though there's a lot of the rear projection, which has gotten better when they go outside and they fall down the
ladder.
It's still pretty brutal. I mean, it's like
frightening. Like, again, it's heights, and he's like hanging from the ladder, and then the guy steps on his hand, and I'm just like freaking out, and my hands were all sweaty. It was like very freaky.
It's very tense. Yeah.
Well, so all in all, what do you both think of? Like, what did you think of the Bond movies that we've watched and the Bond movies you've seen? How do you feel about Goldeneye? Where does it fall in the pantheon of Bond films for you?
I really like this one a lot.
Now, what were some of the things you liked about it? I mean, I know you've been saying them, but
I think the story was good. It moved along at a nice pace. I loved that the Bond girl was like this really intelligent, saves the world girl. And I liked the villain girl. What was her name?
Xenia Onatopp.
She was
Xenia
awesome. I
Onatopp.
loved her. She was great as a villain. And
Yeah.
I love Pierce Brosnan. I think that he is a great Bond. Yeah, this is a good movie.
What about you, Roberto?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely the highlight of the Bond tenure. I mean, of the Brosnan tenure. I think of the Brosnan films, this to me is the best one. Probably Tomorrow Never Dies is very close, but I still think Goldeneye. Again, because of that, it's trying to bring Bond to a modern age, but at the same time hold on to aspects of the character that were pretty much rooted in the Cold War era character. It's kind of a meta commentary on the Bond franchise, and honestly, if it in a way, this movie, if it wasn't for this movie and its success, we wouldn't have a Bond today. I
Right.
honestly
That's true.
think that this is really what kind of resuscitated the franchise. And I know, Rob, you've been talking a lot lately in this series you've been doing about, has Bond's time come? Is it time to retire the character? And I think those were questions that they were facing at that time when License to Kill had not done as well. I know that there was even a consideration at the time. I was checking on the Wikipedia page for Goldeneye where they said, should we take Bond back to the 60s now? Because the Cold War was over. So it really was kind of a Hail Mary attempt to bring the character into the modern era. And it succeeded to the point that we're still getting Bond movies to this day. So it really was critically important for the Bond franchise to continue.
I mean, it's crazy to think that this movie's 25 years old this year. 25 years old this week.
Yeah.
This week, 25 years old. Unbelievable.
I mean, in 2 days, like you said, it'll be the 25th anniversary of Goldeneye. It's hard to believe that, I mean, to me, Goldeneye is a new Bond film. Even though it's 25 years old. I mean, in my life, it was new. It's like,
yeah.
And that's how long I was watching the franchise for. And since then, we're waiting for No Time to Die. This is the 17th Bond film. We're waiting for the 25th Bond film.
Mm-hmm.
That's, it'll be a year. It kills me that it's been sitting on a shelf since April. There's a Bond movie that exists that we haven't seen. I can't believe it.
Yep.
I know, and I keep hearing these rumors about Netflix and HBO trying to make deals to release it, and there's a part of me that's like, yes, but there's a part of me that's like, no, but I need to see it in the theater. It can't be in the TV. So I kind of wrestle with it because there's a part of me that would love to see it right away.
I know.
Also, that experience of going to the movie theater for the first time to see a Bond movie is ingrained in my heart. I just have to go and do it that way. So hopefully we'll get to see it this upcoming April.
Well, listen, if you've got time to stick around, we have a bunch of letters and we've got some chats. Yeah. I think I'll go back and forth with both.
My night is open, so I'm happy to be here and hang out.
People became members of the channel. Martino Sulmoni, Kwok Lee, Jovan Perisic, and Hummingbirder1 became members of the channel. Thank you for that, supporting the channel that way. Posterity writes in, I recently conjured up a time travel machine. Here's what I found takes place in the future. Generations from now, our planet has been wrecked by global warming and the world has become uninhabitable. There's a scientist who figures out a way to invert the entropy of the world in order to essentially eliminate the human wrongdoings of the past. However, that technology could also erase the past and therefore erase the future from ever happening. It could make for an interesting movie plot. That sounds to me like the plot of Tenet. I don't know, but I haven't seen it. But maybe I haven't really actually read those super chats or those tips. But thank you for that, Posterity. Very interesting.
I think
Tim is here. Timbulus Spider Monkeys. What's that?
I'm sorry, Rob. Go ahead. I was just going to say that I believe Tenet is going to come out in video next month, so we're going to get a chance to watch it.
Yeah, I pre-ordered the 3-disc steelbook from Best Buy.
Really?
Nice.
I did. Yes, go figure.
Does that surprise you, Elizabeth?
Surprise!
Well, come on now. Why? What's wrong with that?
Well, at least I get to see it, right?
Yeah, so do I. Tim says, this is the only Brosnan Bond film I actually liked. It's weird. I consider Bond to be one of my favorite franchises, but I'd say I only really like about half of them. That's fair. After this, the only one I've loved was Casino Royale. I think, that's not... I can see why.
Yeah, that's not an unfair assessment. I mean, in a way, the Brosnan era and the Craig era share that in common, that they kind of peaked at the beginning. I think the strongest movie was their first one in their series. Everything else hasn't quite lived up to that first film.
Although I
And
do
both,
like Tomorrow Never Dies. I mean, Jonathan Pryce,
yeah,
the only good news is bad news. It's a little
right.
goofy. And also the Stamper, there's a lot that was cut out of Tomorrow Never Dies. The Stamper character having his he doesn't feel pain. All of that was reused in World Is Not Enough with Robert Carlyle's character. But I think both of those movies are okay. I hate Die Another Day. Die Another Day.
Yeah.
The last half is just a trash fest. It's just ridiculous.
It's almost like it became a parody of Bond at that point. It was just it was a travesty. And just so many elements of that movie don't land correctly, that it just felt like it was time at that point once again to give the franchise a break, give it a little bit of distance, and figure out what direction to take it. And the fact that Martin Campbell was brought to kind of resuscitate the franchise twice, both with Goldeneye and Casino Royale, we really have to credit him with that ability to do that.
He does a great job. I mean, Casino Royale is magnificent. It's a great film. Julian M says, after the gap of Bond films preceding Goldeneye, anticipation was high for me. That opening scene of the bungee jump from the dam is one of my all-time favorite Bond openers. Would you agree?
It's good. Favorite? I don't know. I have to think about that. But yeah, it's really good.
I not only like the bungee jump, but I also love the chasing after the plane at the end of the pre-credit scene. I love that part.
It's great.
Yeah.
It's great.
Yes.
Ethan Holgate says, hi, Rob. Just out of curiosity, what would you think of Charlie Hunnam playing Bond? I think he would be great because I feel he has a gentleman charm, badass quality to him, and I feel he would be great, but I'd like to know your opinion. Charlie Hunnam doesn't have the refinement I think Bond needs. I think you have to remember that Bond, he was a naval commander, and I do like Charlie Hunnam. I mean, I think he's a good actor, but he's too thuggish. I mean, I'd like to see somebody like Henry Cavill, who can be both brutal and suave, But Charlie Hunnam, I mean, maybe, but I just don't know if he has the refinement. I think Bond has to kind of be an old soul, and I don't see Charlie Hunnam as an old soul. And I mean, an old soul. You have to have the British. You have to have classical British. There's got to be something that's inherently very British inside of you to play Bond.
You need the charm too. You need that suave charm. If you don't have that, then it doesn't feel like Bond.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of names are being run around now for possible replacements. I've always thought Tom Hiddleston would make a great Bond. I saw him do that. I don't know if you saw the series The Night Watchman, which I think is based on a John le Carré story, and that feels very classic Bond to me. The way that he plays the character.
Absolutely. So yeah, Mark C says Goldeneye has the worst Bond soundtrack ever. We talked about that.
Wow.
I'll definitely give you the song during the car chase at the beginning of the movie. That music feels straight out of a 80s hip hop video or something.
Yeah,
it's not
so
good.
Weird.
Not Posterity continues spoiling the entire plot of Tenet for me, so I'm going to read it anyway. Would be interesting. It would be interesting if that scientist in the future sent that technology to hide it back into the past. And what if the villain of the movie was trying to trigger that technology to erase the past, present, and some spy was tasked with stopping that? I guess that would be Tenet. Thank you for that, Posterity.
Yeah.
Justin Toner says Goldeneye is one of my favorite Bond movies, top 10. It has all the winning elements for me. Great villain, 006, great Bond women, great direction, and action like the tank chase. Pierce Brosnan nails the role right out of the gate. I think we all agree with that.
Yes, absolutely.
I would add to that top 10 list I would say the third best henchman also. I think Sonia Onatopp stands right there with Jaws and Oddjob as one of the most memorable hench people or hench women in the Bond
Yeah,
franchise.
hashtag me
She's
too, Xenia
great.
Onatop. Me too. I'm a
That's
hench
right.
person too. I agree. And she looks great. She's great in the leather, and I mean, she squeezes you to death.
She
What a way to
does.
go.
And the way she
Yeah.
gets so
It's
excited
almost like you
when
want to be
she's-
killed. You want to be killed by her.
Yeah, I mean, I love the fact that she just relishes killing. Like when the train's gonna smash
Yes,
into
that's
the
the
into the
best.
tank, she's like, "Yes, let's see what's
She's
gonna
like-
happen."
And when she's
he's
screwing
gonna
people up,
derail the
like,
train, and she's
she's
all
like having all
excited.
this, excitement about killing people. She's shooting people and totally reveling on it. And even the Oromov looks at her like, "Dude, you're like getting off here with whatever you're doing. What's going
Also,
on?"
I love the guy who plays Oromov too. His face
Yes.
is he's got a great face.
Great face.
And John Gottfried, Gottfried John is his name.
Okay.
General Arkady Grigorovich Oromov, hero of the Soviet Union, commander of Russia's space division. It's great. This movie has great names: Valentin Dmitrievich Zukovsky, Chechi Karyo's Russian Defense Minister Dmitry Mishkin. It's great. I miss the Cold War. I love Russians as villains. I mean, they weren't as good as, like, the best villains, as everybody knows, are Nazis. Because the Nazis as villains are great. They're jackbooted thugs that all deserve to die, but they're well dressed and they're villainous. But good Russian villains are a big second to me.
Yeah, very much so.
Cinema Gulp sends in a super chat and says, "So this movie is fun, but again, I have to just say that Liz looks amazing, and Rob, you're rocking the long hair once again. Love you guys." Well, Cinema Gulp,
thank you.
Here's to Cinema Gulp. Let's raise our glasses to Cinema Gulp. Cheers to
Nice.
Cinema Gulp.
Cheers.
Let's see. Baruz Harlev. I hope I got your name right. Hey, Rob, did you ever get a chance to see the Netflix movie Metallica Through the Never with Dane DeHaan? I never did. I thought it was epic. The insane, godly music with a storyline embedded. My question is, if you've seen it, what is in the bag that was left? I have not seen it, but I'll go see that. I didn't even know that was there. Metallica Through the Never with Dane DeHaan. I'll watch that. I haven't seen it. Have you?
I believe it was it an IMAX release movie? I believe it was an IMAX release when it came out. I didn't see it, but I think it was filmed for IMAX.
Oh, yeah, I haven't seen it. I'll have to watch that. So I don't know what was in the bag.
It's,
I'll check it out.
I think it's a concert film, but they weave a story through it.
Okay. Well, that's cool. All right. I'll
Yeah.
see that. Anthony Gonzalez says, you guys know when you wrap up your Bond shows, you got to do a Bourne film and a Mission Impossible one as well. After all, current Bond owes a bit to the Bourne films. More than a bit. I think that part of the problem with Quantum of Solace, and I'm a Quantum of Solace apologist, is the way it's edited. They tried to cut it like a Bourne movie, but it wasn't shot like a Bourne movie, so it doesn't work. The editing is too fast. But that's interesting.
That would be fun, though, actually.
We are doing on Thursday of this week, we're doing Austin Powers, International Man of Mystery.
Yeah.
So
I thought we could do a few
That's
more
awesome.
parodies. But
Yeah,
you're
which we
still,
could do
you're
that.
still undecided.
well, we can talk about it. Somebody said we should do Silver Streak as a parody.
Yeah, I read that.
Which is a great idea. That's
Yeah,
a great.
that's a good
Silver
idea.
Streak's great. Cal is here from Swag Props. He says, I was disappointed that we didn't get to see the BMW Z3's gadgetry in action.
Yes.
That and Eric Serra's awkward score are some of the reasons why I prefer Tomorrow Never Dies to this. That's good. Yeah, I could see that. I mean, David Arnold's score for Tomorrow Never Dies really harks back to John Barry's scores, and you get, like you said, Roberto, the gadgetry of the car. So,
And you get it in spades. I mean, they totally go all out to compensate for not using the car in GoldenEye. So,
right. Baruz Haralev is back and says, I've rewatched all of Daniel Craig's Bond movies last week. My order: Casino Royale, Skyfall, number 2, number 3, Spectre, number 4 is Quantum of Solace. My you know what? I'm going to go Casino Royale, Quantum of Solace, Skyfall, and Spectre, because I'm not a fan of Skyfall. It's beautifully made. I just think the villain is, again, they're emulating the Joker, and it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. And Bond repeatedly fails from the pre-title sequence all the way to the end of the movie. Bond fails repeatedly, and M dies because of it. And I'm not a fan.
I would like Skyfall a lot more if it was the last movie in the Craig era after we had a chance to have Bond go in some actual missions. The
Right.
problem is that we went from Quantum of Solace, a movie that finally finishes introducing Bond, to a movie where he's at the end of his career right after.
Right.
It's like, where's the in between? Where are the missions that he went on that created this worn out, washed up agent that we're seeing in Skyfall? That's my problem. It's not so much the story itself. It feels to me, and then in a way, I feel like they're just treading water. Spectre kind of treads some of that same water. The enemy in both movies is pretty much the same, which is irrelevancy. You know, the idea that spies are no longer relevant is pretty much the enemy both of Skyfall and of Spectre. So it's like they never gave us actual missions with Daniel Craig. It just became more of a personal exploration of the character.
I completely agree. I think it's a real mistake that they never gave Daniel Craig a quote-unquote real Bond movie.
Never.
Where he was dispatched with, where he could literally, I mean, it's so, all of his movies are so fucking dour. You know,
Yeah.
it's
I mean, his only mission is the mission in Casino Royale. That's the only time he's actually sent on a mission in any of the movies that he's been in.
It's strange. Our friend Claudius is here. Claudius 0069. I see what Claudius did there.
Speaking of which.
0069. All right. Bon soirée, mon ami. Great show tonight. I loved Goldeneye and Pierce Brosnan in the role. I also love Sean Bean as a former agent and friend of Bond. Second best Boston Bond is the Thomas Crown Affair.
I wanted to do that film.
We should do that film.
I love that film.
We should do that. That movie. I love the Thomas Crown Affair. Directed by diehard
the
Sean
original. You should do a double bill with the original and the remake and compare.
That's
them.
a good idea too. That's a good idea. That's,
Maybe
that's not bad. I like that idea. I don't have the original. I got to get the original in.
By the way, on the comment on Sean Bean being great, Sean Bean would have made a great Bond too. I think he's perfectly cast as a 00, and he could have just as easily been a good Bond as well.
Yeah, I agree.
That's true.
Although he dies in everything. So it's like Sean Bean always dies, except in The Martian. He ends the movie playing golf.
Which is a kind of death in a way.
Oh wow! Come on now. I grew up in a golfing family. Don't say that.
I'm joking. I'm joking.
Ross Howell is here. Ross says, Rob, Elizabeth, and the Post-Geek Singularity always give me the experience of love. Thanks. Well, thank you, Ross.
Nice.
You just sent us the experience of love, which is good. Well, listen, I got some letters to read. I hope people can stick with us. I know the show is long, but I'm going to read this. So, hi, Rob and Elizabeth. I was hoping to have this email written and sent in time for the Living Daylights episode of WINEning, but as I sat down to write it, it turned out to be far more emotional trip than I was expecting. As a result, it's taken me a lot longer to write. This letter is about the film The Living Daylights and why I rank it so highly amongst others from the Bond franchise. You should get your son, Roberto, to hear this. I don't usually feel the need to explain why I rank films the way I do. Everyone has their favorites and reasons for them being so. Things that work for some people might not always work for others. Nothing wrong with that. After all, if we all like the same things, this would be a pretty boring planet to live on. Firstly, I really like Dalton's portrayal of Bond. He's a far more introspective Bond than any of the iterations that came before him. This, along with his physical characteristics, make him far closer to the literary figure from Fleming's work. Sure, looking like the character isn't overly important, but his lack of quippy dialogue makes him feel more like a Fleming Bond. Having this version of Bond in a story that was far more down-to-earth than some of the previous entries in the franchise makes it feel, at least to me, like a much closer representation of the Bond I grew up reading. Sure, I love most of the films that came before it, but this one felt like a what would Bond look like in the real world kind of a scenario. After all, apart from skis on his car, what else really happens that couldn't take place in a real-life situation? He's not flying around in space. He's not slapping makeup on and passing himself off as Japanese, which Japanese people seem to totally buy for some reason. There's no villains with tanks or sharks to eat their enemies. It's an arms dealer, a double-crossing KGB officer, and a tough guy who strangles people who he fights against. No giants with metal teeth. There are no tarot readers with 100% accuracy in predicting the future. Only stuff that could actually, realistically happen. Secondly, as I've mentioned in the chats, this was the first Bond film I saw at the cinema. Because of this, I seem to have a very strong attachment to it. Same with me and Spy Who Loved Me. Sure, I'd seen other Bond films before, but nothing hits like watching something on the big screen. Seeing that final fight between Bond and Necros in the cinema was epic. The scenic shots of Morocco doubling for Afghanistan are glorious, but I was hooked right from the pre-title sequence set on the Rock of Gibraltar. There aren't many other pre-title sequences I liked as much as this. I too love that pre-title sequence. Apart from Russia with Love, Goldeneye, and The Spy Who Loved Me. Thirdly, and maybe the main reason I have such a place in my heart for this movie, has to do with my grandfather. As I've mentioned to you in the past, the person who I had the greatest influence on my tastes was my grandfather. He was the person who really instilled in me the idea of reading for leisure. He was a massive fan of sci-fi, fantasy, and horror, and introduced me to all of these genres. At a very young age, some might say too young, he gave me books by Stephen King, James Herbert. Man, James Herbert is the author that every young 11-year-old boy should read, let me tell you. Isaac Asimov, H.G. Wells, Philip K. Dick, J.R.R. Tolkien, Lord Dunsany, Ursula K. Le Guin, Arthur C. Clarke, Ray Bradbury, and a load of others. His tastes make me firmly believe he would have fitted in very well amongst all of us in the Post-Geek Singularity. However, if I had to say what his favorite genre of books to read were, I would have to say spy thrillers. I remember his bookshelf being filled with books by John Buchanan, or John Buchan, I don't know, John le Carré, and a ton of other authors of the like. The ones I remember seeing the most, probably because they were the ones I recognized the most, were the Ian Fleming Bond books. When he noticed I was interested in them, he let me read them. I devoured them quite quickly. Seeing how much I liked them, he went to his local video shop and rented out as many Bond films as he could. I spent a week at my grandparents' place watching and rewatching all the videos he had. I was desperate for more. I wouldn't have to wait long. It was early 1987 and a new Bond movie was coming out later that year. He told me we would go see the next one in the cinema together. But life has a way, I knew this was going to get sad, but life has a way of screwing up the best laid plans. In June of that year, my grandfather, who little did I know had become extremely sick, was in a hospice, not expected to live much more than a couple more weeks. I watched as this strong, thoughtful, artistic, disciplined man, who was the very foundation of my life, seemed to be built upon, quickly withered away. God, I hate cancer. The last conversation I had with him, he said he wasn't going to be able to go see the movies with me. My dad told him that he'd take me, and he smiled. He knew my dad wasn't a fan of the franchise, but he was glad that we'd go to this one together. By July, my grandfather had passed away, but later that year, my dad kept his promise to both of us and took me to see The Living Daylights. I think he liked it. I'm not sure. He's never been the most communicative person, and he was even more solemn that day. I haven't really spoken to him about it. Again, he's not very open with his feelings kind of guy, but it will always be a memory I cherish, and I hope he has similar feelings about it. Well, now that I've laid that heavy story on you, I think it's best I go. I'm not sure one of my typical Groucho Marx quotes, sign-offs is appropriate here, but if nothing, I'm not predictable. So, no man goes before his time unless the boss leaves early. Groucho Marx. As always, your friendly neighborhood spider monkey signing off, Tim. See, this is why I love this community. I love that people write me these letters that I almost got choked up reading.
Yeah.
Well, Tim, thank you for writing that in. I very much appreciate that. This next one comes from, it's another long one, comes from Joe Dick. He's a new letter writer. I don't know if I'm supposed to laugh at that, but I can't not. Hi, Rob and Elizabeth. Goldeneye was my intro into Bond. I'm still quite fond of Brosnan's depiction, although I find they made him a little too suave with not enough of the brutality and cruelty of the literary Bond to balance the suaveness. I guess you could say that about some or most of the others too, I guess, especially Roger Moore. It's a hard mix to get right, and I think Connery is still the only one to get it almost exact. But Brosnan is still pretty good. I've actually enjoyed every incarnation of Bond to varying degrees and for different reasons. Brosnan was my first, and you never forget, you're first. Roger Ebert described Brosnan's Bond as the first who is self-aware, and unfortunately I think that's true. There's talk of sexual harassment, even if in 1995 it could still be playful, and he's too aware of his mortality. I loved his exchange with Xenia after he beats her at Baccarat. She says, enjoy it while you can, and Bond's reply is perfect. The very words I live by. Bond has always delivered a lot of pretty preposterous zingers. Brosnan is almost glib, a quality that will get worse in the future for him. I'm glad they did a female M in 1995. If done today, we would hear endlessly about how wonderful it was, but 25 years ago, they just did it. If this was my very first Bond, It was also my first M, and it never occurred to me M couldn't be a woman. It's a job that only requires brains and mental toughness, not necessarily physical toughness. One of the things I disliked about Skyfall is that her M didn't get a good enough death. Disappointments with this movie include learning that Bond's rank of commander is in fact not with the Navy, but just the motor vehicle department. And Xenia's accent was a bit odd. If she was from Georgia, I would have expected a bit more of a twang. I love Xenia as a character, not just the name Onatop, a bit on the nose, but not when compared to names like Pussy Galore, but especially her fun verbal sparring with Bond. When she too orders a vodka martini, he asks how she takes it. Wink, she says, straight up with a twist. Wink. Indeed. His flirting with Moneypenny is enjoyable as well, and it's a shame if punishment of real abusers means the end of harmless flirting. If Bond's day is done, the groundwork was laid here. M describes Bond as a relic of the Cold War, a dinosaur, a sexist, a misogynist. He's not, but if how Bond fits in the world was already questioned in '95, of course it can only be worse now. Is Bond's day done? I hope not. Moneypenny's only response to Bond is that the penalty is to someday make good on his innuendos. Bond being self-aware isn't necessarily a bad thing, as long as he's not too self-aware, but that does seem at odds with his still somewhat superhuman abilities, which Brosnan has in common, especially I think with Roger Moore. Connery, I guess maybe Lazenby, the literary Bond of course, and Daniel Craig's are all a lot more human than Brosnan's or Moore's Bonds. At the time I don't remember caring, now noticing I still don't care that much. I loved all the stunts. It works in the context of not just a Bond movie, but of a Bond movie of the era. No idea about the plausibility of Goldeneye, but I believe that too. I was a little distracted by the size of those Russian hats. And despite the death of the Soviet communism being, of course, a good thing in the real world, I couldn't help thinking it was bad for the James Bond franchise. The villains just aren't the same anymore, but it was nice to be able to shoehorn in some faux Soviets for this movie. It felt like old times, and I guess that was the idea. As well as the stunts, I enjoyed the Q-branch tech as always, but also the real 90s technology. I laughed seeing those giant computer monitors, and I'm not sure if the 90s was a great time fashion-wise, but at least Bond's tux was timeless, and Monte Carlo is always Monte Carlo. As for Q himself, his scenes with Bond are always a highlight for me. The original Q, like the original Bond, is still the best, even though I like their successors a lot too. I don't remember if I thought this at the time, probably not, but seeing 006 at the beginning, and then the name Janus, as the evil organization behind it all, named for literally two-faced Roman god, made it a little obvious that we'd see him again as the man behind it all. But even knowing that, even if in '95 I predicted it, I didn't care, it still worked. Maybe nostalgia is making me a tad generous, but personally I'd give this 3 glasses of an '88 Bollinger, of course. Enough said. Well, Joe, that was a great letter. I love that letter.
Yeah.
I have a letter here from Jeffrey Mao, our chairman, but I'm going to read that on our my regular show because it's a pretty epic letter, and I've got one last letter here from Jason Webster. Jason Webster says, "Hi Robert, I hope yourself, Elizabeth, and the wonderfully inclusive Post-Geek Singularity are feeling decidedly renewed for the week ahead. I agree that Goldeneye is the best of the Bond films starring Pierce Brosnan. However, I also agree the other films in which he appeared as 007 began an unfortunate and slow descent in quality after this film. Unfortunate, as it seemed things had appeared to be looking up for Brosnan regarding his eventual foray into the franchise. After having missed landing on one previous occasion, he had landed for the coveted part for Goldeneye. It seemed a great starting point as it received both critical and commercial success. The film grossed in the U.S. $351.2 million from a budget of $60 million. That's a huge hit. And then it made tons of money around the world. Don't get me wrong, by no means am I suggesting he was the cause of the slide. The descent had nothing to do with Pierce Brosnan. On the contrary, right from the beginning, he took to the role like a duck to water, oozing charm, charisma, confidence, and wry humor, making his portrayal strike the perfect blend of Moore's debonair Bond and Dalton's serious Bond. He really genuinely bridged the gap between those two takes on the character, and his performance never wavered across the films in which he played 007. Brosnan was already an experienced theater and film actor, having taken to the stage upon graduating from the Drama Academy in 1975, when he met Bond producer Albert Cubby Broccoli on the set of For Your Eyes Only. His first wife, Cassandra Harris, played the part of Contessa Liesel von Schaff in the film. In the years leading up to their meeting, Brosnan had worked as an acting assistant stage manager for the York Theatre Royal, Royal, and promptly moved into acting through roles in Wait Until Dark, The Red Devil Battery Sign, and in Franco Zeffirelli's Fulmina, alongside Joan Plowright and Frank Finlay. Frank Finlay's in Life Force, just an aside. He also appeared in films such as A Long Good Friday, The Mirror Cracked, and episodes of the British television series The Professionals, Murphy's Stroke, and Play for Today. After his chance meeting with Broccoli, Brosnan turned his attention to America and won the lead role in the miniseries The Manions of America. However, it would be the American detective series Remington Steele that solidified Brosnan's popularity and caught the attention of Broccoli, as Eon had to secure a new James Bond after Roger Moore left the franchise after A View to a Kill in 1985. However, with Eon Productions keen to sign The Irishman, NBC began to play hardball and issued another season of Remington Steele. With Brosnan having to honor his commitment to the series, Broccoli withdrew his offer to The Irishman to play 007 in The Living Daylights, and the role went to Timothy Dalton. Brosnan went on to appear in films The Fourth Protocol, Nicholas Meyer's The Deceivers, and the television miniseries adaptation of James Clavell's The Noble House by NBC. After License to Kill, the Bond series would go into a long hiatus brought upon by legal wrangles between MGM and Broccoli's Danjak. However, despite the legal dispute, a poster and script for Dalton's third and final outing as 007 had meant they very nearly went into production when the decision was made to halt the project. It is often neglected that the other key in the delay was a series of events from the failed purchase of MGM UA by the Australian-American financial services company Quintex before French company Pathé Entertainment acquired the studio, where its decision to sell the international distribution rights of the Bond library catalog led to their own legal dispute with Danjak. MGM Pathé eventually filed for bankruptcy, and the studio fell under the stewardship of the subsidiary of French bank Credit Lyonnais. Credit Lyonnais. If the film had proceeded, it would have been an adaptation of the Fleming short story The Property of a Lady, and plot would eventually be revived for Brosnan's second outing as Bond Tomorrow Never Dies after minor alterations to the screenplay. During this period, Brosnan appeared in The Lawnmower Man, Mrs. Doubtfire, and the television movie Victim of Love, and the spy thriller Death Train. Then in 1994, Brosnan was given the role of James Bond for Goldeneye. Principal photography began on Goldeneye on the 16th of January 1995 and was completed on the 6th of June. Because Pinewood Studios was unavailable, interior filming was undertaken at Leavesden Studios, a converted Rolls-Royce factory. Location shooting was undertaken in Ticino, Switzerland, the bungee jump scene, Monaco, Russia, and Puerto Rico. Reference footage for the tank chase was shot in St. Petersburg and matched with footage of the actual chase filmed at Leavesden. The sequences for the armed train scene were filmed at the Nini Valley Railway near Peterborough, England. Directed by Martin Campbell, Criminal Law, Goldeneye re-energized the franchise with its story pacing, gorgeous locales, action set pieces, and Brosnan's performance. However, he was matched in acting stakes by Sean Bean, who turned in a good performance as the vengeful former MI6 agent Alec Trevelyan. To me, the film is very enjoyable and is keeping with early films in the franchise and mindful of never overplaying the humor or the gadgets. Goldeneye also has the distinction of many firsts for the Bond franchise. Brosnan's first outing as Bond, the first film to be shot at Leavesden Studios, the first Bond to use computer-generated imagery, the first Bond film for director Martin Campbell, the first film for Judi Dench as M, the first and only actress to have played the role. With the success of Goldeneye, Martin Campbell has gone on to carve out a solid career as a director with a filmography that includes The Mask of Zorro, which I loved, Vertical Limit, Casino Royale, Edge of Darkness, and The Foreigner. Whether you are a fan of, he also directed Green Lantern. Whether you are a fan of the Connery Bond, Moore Bond, or the Dalton Bond, there is something you can find to enjoy with this film. Goldeneye is the something for everyone film of the four to star Pierce Brosnan as 007. Sadly, Brosnan would finish his run as the world's best and most famous secret agent with the sluggish, The World Is Not Enough, and the unintentionally funny Die Another Day. He deserved better and to go out on a high. Am I the only one who feels history is repeating itself with Daniel Craig? Well, Roberto, you said that same thing. I hope yourself, Elizabeth, and the fantastic members of the Post-Geek Singularity have a wonderful week. Sincerely, Jason Webster. Well, those were good letters. Let's see. There's Justin Tonner says, The Richard hosted a great watch party for Goldeneye. We had a great turnout and loved the beach scene with Bond and Natalia. No, it's why you're alone. That's a great line when she says that to him. Claudius Galore. Claudius was 0069. Now he's Claudius Galore. Are spies irrelevant? This is a fundamental question in the information age, and rightly so, of recent Bond films. Can an algorithm tell us whether or not an organization will deploy a weapon of mass destruction? Sometimes. but not always. Aeon sent in a super chat and said, "Great show tonight. Love Goldeneye. Have you seen If Looks Could Kill? I worked on If Looks Could Kill." Yes, directed by William Deere. It's a fun Bond-esque film with some good action and comedy. Yes, If Looks Could Kill was a Bond parody that was made when I was at Warner Brothers.
We should watch that for the show.
Yeah, I don't own that. Well, this has been a great show. First of all, Roberto, I want to thank you for being on, but I think I'd love to hear both of your opinions about that. Do you think James Bond, Elizabeth, is still relevant today?
Well, we've talked about this before, and I think it can be if you tell the right story.
But in the information age, do we still need spies? And, when all the villains that blow up buildings now seem to be from, the caves of Tora Bora, how do you make a movie about somebody who's hanging out in Monte Carlo gambling?
Yeah, well, and we've found out that you can do a lot more damage manipulating an election or stealing money electronically than you could blowing stuff up. Like the way in which crime is conducted in the modern age, it's more for the computer geeks to go out there and solve than it is for the spies, right? It's kind of a different world. It's interesting, Rob, because you and I have gone back and forth and in discussions in our Zoom parties and stuff, we've talked about, should they do a Bond in the period piece, go back in time and set Bond back in its own original time period. In a way, I feel like the Kingsman movie kind of tried to do a little bit of that, even though it's a modern movie. It's kind of harkening back to that style. So I don't know what the answer is. One thing that I was realizing in a conversation actually on the Facebook page, on the PGS Facebook page with some other members of the community, was that assuming that the next movie beyond the last Craig film, beyond No Time to Die, we're looking at a Bond movie that's going to probably come out in the late 2020s, maybe 2025, 2026, let's say. If Bond is 35 years old at the time when that movie starts, and it's a modern day movie, because I think that's the age Craig was when he did Casino Royale. So let's assume we're going to find an actor in his mid-30s to be the next Bond. This is going to be the first Bond born after the end of the Cold War. Not even, no overlap whatsoever with the Cold War world. So is Bond relevant in a world where there's never been a Cold War for James Bond? I think that's an important question to ask. And does it make sense to continue moving forward with this character if the period in which he was born out of, he's no longer even capable of being born out of anymore? So I just think that's an interesting question to ponder.
Yeah, but the question is, does the Cold War, is that the crux of the story, or can it be broader than that? Does that have to be, the pin that keeps the whole franchise going? I don't know.
Right.
We're creative. There's creative people out there. They can come up with
and with the Brosnan movies, that's what was attempted, right? This is the movie to tell us. Goldeneye was the movie that told the audience the Cold War is over, but Bond can continue.
Yeah.
And then we got new kinds of megalomanias. We got a media mogul in one. We got an oil baron in the next one. We got a North Korean plastic surgery crazy whatever in Die Another Day, right? So it's been the success of that post-Cold War Bond has been up and down, right? And then with Daniel Craig, they decided to go more introspective with the character. It's been less about the enemy that he's fighting and more about kind of dealing with his own inner demons. How do we move forward with the character now? I think we've seen more misses than hits in the post-Cold War era. I don't know. I agree with you. With the right creative mind, I think you can do anything. It's just what's that next story gonna be?
Yeah.
Well, tonight we saw a private citizen. His company launched 4 astronauts into space to the first time with a space taxi going to the International Space Station. And when you have people in our planet like Jeff Bezos and Elon Musk, who, I mean, the Bond villains of yore couldn't even imagine having the amount of capital Amazon controls. I mean, we
Right.
now have real world people that are way beyond Hugo Drax. And I mean, Elon Musk is one step away from Hugo Drax, and he doesn't need to steal a Moonraker shuttle because he's the one building the shuttles that our own government is now using to go into space.
Right.
Yep.
And so, you know, whether you're talking about Russian oligarchs or whether you're talking about Bezos or whether you're talking about, I mean, the real world and what's going on in the real world has sort of supplanted even the biggest megalomaniac. You know, you think about both Carl Stromberg in Spy Who Loved Me and then Hugo Drax and Moonraker. They both wanted to destroy the world, kill everybody on the Earth, and start over. You know, I'm gonna build an undersea kingdom, which kind of silly, and I'm gonna build an orbital habitat paradise, whatever. I'll kill everybody with Orchidea Negro, and then maybe go back down and repopulate the Earth.
Later, right?
But you know, nowadays, I think actually humanity and the world, because of social media and because of technology, we've just become a different world. And I wonder, you know, I watched I don't know if you saw the 6th episode. Remember we watched The Bodyguard that starred Jon Snow, that 6-episode show from the BBC.
Yes.
That was great. But what happens with that is then the story becomes small. You're just protecting the life of one woman. You know, and if you're protecting the life of one woman in London from getting assassinated, and that can be exciting, how do you then go make these, like, I love Bond ski sequences, but how do you get an excuse for Bond to be on skis anywhere ever anymore? You know, there's like, who's gonna, Telly Savalas is not gonna be using Piz Gloria as his his allergy research center so Bond can ski down from it, and all the things that I love, like we don't need planes anymore because we've got drones, and when you have drones, there's aircraft aren't cool anymore, and the villains can sit a planet away. You can be halfway around the world and fly a drone and kill somebody now. You can be in Vegas. Oh, I'm going to work, and I fly drones in Afghanistan, even though I'm in Las Vegas, and then I go gamble in the casinos at night. Our planet has just changed so much that's why I'm constantly wondering, is Bond as a character relevant? I mean, Ethan Hunt, the Mission Impossible franchise has kind of supplanted Bond. They're still figuring out ways. But watching Rogue Nation and Fallout, I was like, these are both. If Bond was in either one of these movies, that would have been a great Bond outing. And yet they make it work.
Even those movies are starting to kind of feel repetitive, because in the Mission Impossible ones, the last two have all been about rogue agents and trying to, you know, like, there are elements that they're just kind of having to rehash. I think just because there's just not that much at that scale. I mean, going back to your example of the megalomaniacs of nowadays, Jeff Bezos would be the equivalent of Blofeld, right? Well, what's the biggest threat that Jeff Bezos poses to the world? That he's not paying medical benefits to his employees? Like, could you imagine Bond going on a campaign to try to get Bezos to provide medical benefits to thousands of employees? Like, it's just not that compelling, right? I mean, outside of a Thanos-like plot, which was actually what was done in the Kingsman movie, where the Samuel Jackson character is like a Steve Jobs who wants to kill half the world for the planet to thrive again, right? To kind of reduce the population. Outside of plots like that, I don't think that there's just much of a well to go to. And we've already gotten it with Kingsman. And from what I've heard from No Time to Die, it looks like some of the plot in No Time to Die revolves around something along those lines too. Yeah. So, you know, it starts to kind of cannibalize itself. There's just not that many compelling storylines with the people who are the true kind of owners of the world nowadays.
No,
it's like Blofeld. It's like Blofeld won, and he just started Amazon.
I mean, these are all very compelling questions, and I think that, you know, that's why I said that maybe Bond is a character that needs to be retired. You know, after 25 years, and you've gone through from 1962 to 72 to 82 to 92 to the aughts to 2020, now 2021. We're into the third decade of the 21st century. Bond has been around for such a long time, but it's almost like he is a sexist, misogynist dinosaur. He is a relic of the Cold War, and he is somebody that in the modern day, what do you do with the 00 agent? I mean, do you have him go assassinate Taliban leaders? There was this story that broke this week about how America had Israel or the Israelis assassinate the second head of ISIS on the streets of in in Iran, and the Iranians were laughing at that. Like what do you do now? How do you make something relevant for audiences, especially when you have the Marvel movies? Now the villains you're thwarting, you brought up Thanos. I mean, if somebody can snap their fingers and get rid of half the people on the earth, I mean, and one of the most interesting things to me about Endgame was the scenes 5 years later when they're dealing with that post-snap world. And it would have been interesting to see, I mean, there we saw from the perspective of people that felt they lost. But what if you were talking to climatologists and people that are like, you know what? Losing half of humanity was the best thing that happened to us. I mean, we're all going to die anyway, so what we postponed the inevitable, or the inevitable happened a little early for half the population, but it gave us a new lease on life. You know, you didn't see that, of course, because it's still monstrous what Thanos did, but
sure.
What do you do? Like, how do you make a relevant plot where James Bond has really anything, in terms of...
Yeah, but even if it's internet based, like, these villains now are, everything's on the internet. It's still a human being that you have to deal with.
Sure.
So, I mean, there's always the possibility that the spies will have to find a way to find these people who are doing these things on the internet.
But it's like, the subprime mortgage meltdown. People lost all this money, but a lot of people got away with it. We had the kind of money that was stolen during that time, and because of what went on and how much money was lost and how many lives were ruined. I mean, that happened for real, and people did it on Wall Street. They got greedy, and it happened. I mean, it was the kind of money. It was like less money. Sean Bean wanted to steal less money than was destroyed in 2008 during the financial meltdown.
That's right.
And you look at yourself now, and you look at these Bond villains, and it's like, Auric Goldfinger. All he wanted to do was irradiate our gold supply so it could make his gold worth more money. We're not even on the gold standard anymore. So
Jeff Bezos makes more in 1 week that Sean Bean wanted to steal in this movie.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when you're worth $150 billion, it's crazy. Well, that's interesting. I mean, I think that's a question. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, one thought that I had is, I don't know if in the advent of a fragmented world with Brexit, things like exiting the European Union, if maybe there's a story there, something to do with how as a world we have become more fragmented. I don't know if maybe there's something there, somebody who tried to exploit that, and then Bond has to go and resolve that. So I don't know if there's a story there to do with, where we are as a world.
Like, I like the Tom Clancy books, and the second to last Jack Ryan novel, The Sum of All Fears, you had these neo-Nazis, that wanted to set off, that wanted to start a war between America and Russia, and they wanted to see a Fourth Reich rise up. I mean, again, Nazis are always great villains. You can always trot out the neo-Nazis, but even that gets old.
Yeah, and then the rise of China as a superpower, a little bit of that was explored in Tomorrow Never Dies, but maybe there's a potential there with that. We know the North Korea thing, they've already tried it. It didn't quite work that well with Die Another Day. So I don't know. It's a very, like you said, Rob, when you mentioned, again, the Marvel movies, it's like we have gotten to the point where the stories have to be so big, that the plot of the bad guy has to be so big, and Bond is a character that has to be grounded much more in reality. So it's like we now need superheroes to deal with the kinds of threats that we're bringing to the screen. Bond is limited by the fact that he still has to be grounded in a reality that can't quite get to that level. You can't have Bond fight Thanos, right? You need Iron Man and you need Captain America to fight Thanos.
I think we need both. I don't like the idea that now only superhero movies are all that matter.
Yeah.
I mean, I want to see some spy movies still.
Well, no, I agree with you. And then maybe the idea then, and it looks like No Time to Die is doing this, you make the villain, rather than having an underwater city, he's somebody that controls a lot of financial power, but you make him a megalomaniac. Maybe he does want to eliminate half the planet, or he has some genetic virus that's going to go after certain people that have Neanderthal genes or something.
You have Elon Musk, who's like trying to track every single person. Like, that's a pretty interesting story to go after.
Yeah, no, it could be. I mean, but it's just a question of how are you able to go after a story like this that's also visually compelling, and you can have action set pieces. Like, I just don't see, they put Bond in the snow in Spectre, but they couldn't figure out a way to get him on skis, and I was bummed out by that. But I understand, and in this day and age, I mean, like you said, the damage, look at even Dark Knight Rises, Bane goes into a financial center and steals a bunch of money via computers. It's like, and he's a Batman villain. And he cuts off, I mean, it's kind of cool, he cuts off Gotham City, and, you know, but even that kind of a little goofy, didn't always work in that film, but...
Yeah.
You know,
it'll be seeing Bond on a computer, you know, spiking people and releasing viruses to try to stop crimes from happening online or something.
Yeah, I mean,
it's just not that intriguing.
I mean, it's an interesting. I think that No Time to Die might very well be the biggest watershed moment in the Bond franchise history because of whatever it's about. Like you said, it does have some kind of viral component, and it will be very interesting to see where that goes. And that's you know, it's a franchise I've watched literally my entire life, and I've grown up with it. And as I've changed, and as the world changed, Bond has changed, and sometimes successfully, sometimes unsuccessfully. But I still love the Bond franchise. I love watching the films. I mean, I still, as a middle-aged man, there's still a part of me that wants to be James Bond still. You know, luckily I have a Bond girl by my side all the time.
One thing I'm wondering with No Time to Die also, one thing I'm wondering with No Time to Die too is, will they do something similar to what was done with Batman: The Dark Knight Rises, where they actually give the story finally, like at least the Craig era, gets an actual conclusion to that story, and maybe let it rest for a little while and rethink the Bond franchise, maybe, you know, 5-10 years down the road after we've had some time to just kind of... I mean, we've never actually given Bond a formal closure in any of his iterations. Maybe
I think he's going to die. I think
formal closure, right? Let's kill the character off, let it rest at that, and then maybe take the time to really reimagine him as a hero for the modern age.
Yeah, I think James Bond's going to die at the end of No Time to Die. I mean, they kind of have to play that out. What's he going to do? Ride into the sunset? I mean, they already have him as a father. Apparently, you know, he's in a relationship.
He already rode off into the sunset at the end of Spectre. I mean, we can't do that again, right?
Right. So, literally, he did.
Yeah. So at this point, it's like, well, if this is really, I mean, it seems to me like the direction they're going with this one. He's retired. He has to be called back for one final mission. Has to face yet another demon from his past or whatever, you know. So it looks to me like this is going to be the first time the franchise is ever going to have a conclusion. And maybe that's the best thing to do to it right now, to then give us the opportunity to rethink what Bond would be like later on.
Well, listen, Roberto, the time has come where we have to rate this movie on our scale of... What is our scale? It's our bottoms-up scale, Elizabeth.
Our bottoms-up scale is from 1 to 4 glasses.
1 to 4 glasses of wine, well, 4 being the best. So what would you, Elizabeth, give Goldeneye?
I'm going to give Goldeneye 3.5 glasses.
3.5 glasses. Roberto, how many glasses do you give Goldeneye?
You know, Elizabeth, I'm going to give it 3.5 glasses too. I think I have to dock a half a glass because the car never paid off in this movie.
Right,
so
the BMW.
But outside of that, 3.5 glasses for me as well.
I'm going to go, I'll make it the trifecta, or Dieter called it something, something on our Let's Get Physical Media. He called it, when it's the numbers repeated 3 times, it's a Schlopsen something or other.
That's right.
If Dieter's watching this, I don't know what the German word is, but I'm also going to give it 3.5 glasses of wine. I don't think there's any perfect Bond film necessarily.
Right.
But this one, 3.5 glasses of wine, absolutely. And we are going to come back. Dr. Claude, now he's Dr. Claude. He sent in another thing. He says, I agree, Rob. Human intelligence doesn't need to be in a casino in Monte Carlo to find an enemy in Tora Bora. Mr. Robot deals with the security of the financial system. Yes. Homeland deals with terrorism, elections, and disinformation. I agree. I mean, Homeland's a great show. That went off the air. And Joe Dick sends in a super chat and says, Bond dies. Q is the Bond for the 21st century.
Very
That's
good
interesting.
point.
I mean, that could be it. Well,
The
I
gadget
guess
guy, yeah.
we will end this. This is our longest episode of whining about movies yet. I want to thank Roberto Suarez all the way up in Portland in your embattled city.
Yeah.
Is it still embattled?
There's areas that are still some protesting going on regularly. So yeah, it's there's some we could spend another hour talking about
Yes,
that. So I'm not gonna.
I'll stay away from that.
Yeah, we'll stay away from that.
I'll stay away from that.
We could use James Bond in downtown Portland right now.
Yeah. Talk about. It's nice that people who want to protest on a daily basis have built-in infrastructure in a city that was given to them that they had nothing to do with making, but they can certainly come destroy it, bringing it to a standstill. Good
right.
Way to go, guys. Well done. But Claudius Largo, Claudius says, I think the tropes are actually killing Bond, i.e. extinction-level threats, episodic entries, the girls, the gadgets, the cars are passé. I agree with Roberto. The next Bond needs a multi-movie arc.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe.
Yeah.
But the problem is, it's really funny. I mean, if Bond doesn't have the girls and the gadgets...
Then it's not Bond.
I mean,
he's not really Bond anymore, right?
I mean, nowadays it's like young people don't even like to have sex. And watching some guy, like some lascivious, like my dad is slobbering over that young, tasty thing. That's disgusting. I mean, it's just... It's a weird time we live in, man. It's a weird time. And that's why I ask. Maybe Bond's time is over. But that's a question that we're going to ponder with Claude himself on Tuesday night as we delve into Skyfall and we wrap up our journey into the James Bond franchise.
Yep.
I want to thank Roberto Suarez for being here. I want to thank Elizabeth for having me on her show. And
You're welcome.
I want to thank her for now including our double feature. We've watched 97 movies. Our 97th show is going to happen on Tuesday. On Thursday, we're going to do our 98th show, and we're going to watch Austin Powers, International Man of Mystery.
Yes.
And then Saturday will be our 99th show.
99. Which we're still deciding.
We don't know what we're going to do for 99, and certainly our 100th episode should be... I can't believe a show that was born out of quarantine, born out of COVID lockdown, will have reached 100 episodes.
Yep.
And COVID is still raging, if not raging more than ever, across the United States.
Yes.
I know.
But thank God, look, we got to do this show. You and I.
And my birthday is this Friday. I turned 50 this Friday, so I will be celebrating in some fashion or other. But I'll be wishing hope everybody has a good weekend. I'll be celebrating my 50th this week.
So you have no time to die.
I have no time to die.
Now, do you have anything special planned for your 50th birthday?
Sadly, no. I mean, my wife is actually in town, but quarantining right now because she had to travel to go visit her dad in the Midwest. So we're not even going to get a chance to be together through the rest of the week. So we'll see. We'll plan something at a later time.
Is she like quarantining in a plastic bubble somewhere, or is she in a different hotel?
So we have a friend who has a ADU, a little house behind her house that they built, like a little attached or detached apartment, and so she's staying there for the time being.
Wow!
Until she gets her COVID test results back. So I've been solo parenting here, going on a full 10 days now. So.
Wow, that's craziness! Wow. All right. So we come to the end. The dogs have to be walked and all that. So Elizabeth, why don't you take us out?
Okay. Everyone you meet has a story to tell that you have yet to hear, and all you have to do is listen.
All you have to do is listen. And before I say final goodbyes, I want to point out that we have the greatest moderating staff here at the Burnettwork. I want to thank Mike Bodden. I want to thank Greg Smith. I want to thank the Richard. The Richard obviously runs our watch parties, our Zoom parties. They actually had a Zoom party for Goldeneye. I want to thank Bunyan Snipe. Let's see who else is here. The Richard and Bunyan Snipe are here. I don't know if anyone else is here. I'll keep going back. Nope, I think just the two of you guys are here. I want to thank you all for being here. We have a great moderating staff here at the Post-Geek Singularity. If you can become a member of the channel, it starts at 99 cents a month. You can get emojis. We're gonna get a Elizabeth emoji soon.
Yeah, where's my
Nice.
emoji?
It's coming, babe.
Come on, man.
Come on, man.
Come on, man.
It's gonna happen. And I want to thank.
I want a Z emoji.
Okay. Oh yeah, we have to make a Zardoz head.
Yes, and a Z.
Oh,
A
perfect.
Z. I want a Zardoz head. I will join the channel. I'm going to become a member if I can get a Zardoz emoji. Yeah, so I want to thank everybody for their letters, great letters. Again, Jeffrey Mao wrote in a great Bond letter, but it's really long, so I'm going to read it on the show tomorrow, the chairman. And if you want to write in, we are going to have Claude, who was with us for the Do the Right Thing show, and he is going to defend the honor of Skyfall. So that should be fun. We get to watch Skyfall, and so there you go.
There you go.
So now we're going to bring an end to Elizaview's episode number 96, Goldeneye.
Goodbye. Good night.
And as always, have a better night.
Have a better night.
Bye.
So wait, we let's see.